Welcome to Fulfilling This Belly Sting. A show dedicated to aligning a journey to a better mental health using the understandings of the ancient Norse. Join us each weekday morning at 7 a.m. Alaska time. Someone's little girl, daughter, sister, girlfriend, fiance, wife, cousin, mother, auntie, grandmother, great grandmother, elder, disappears, shattering, a family, a community, the world. There is something we can all do. Remember them. Look at that.
Good morning and happy Thor's Day to you. Today we speak about the intrinsic strength of Thor and hopefully have us understand that the strength that Thor demonstrated throughout all the sagas we have inside. One of them anyway. Before we get started today, I want to say talk to all of you who have liked, followed, and subscribed us in any of the platforms. I very much appreciate your support. And for those of you who haven't clicked that button just yet, I ask that you please consider doing so, as it helps to kind of promote our message even further through the algorithms of all the secret handshakes there necessary to all of these platforms. Most importantly, I want to give a huge shout out to New Reality TV at newrealitytv.com, a streaming channel dedicated to offering us a different perspective and a different look at our own journeys. Something amongst that collection can resonate deep inside, drive our emotional energy to help us move forward in our spiritual journey. I want to also call out my website, norsewhispers.com or akoutlaw.com. And there you can find out all the information about me, my message, my shows, and all of the other presentations that we offer, including for those of you who may need an ear to bend or another voice of reason. By all means, stop at our coaching site. I offer life coaching services for any who need it. Whether you're suffering from an addiction, recovering from an addiction, whether you're struggling with domestic violence issues, by all means, come, let's talk. Let's discuss. Let's open a dialogue and see if we can help you to connect to that spiritual path that lies before you. As always, I also want to give a shout out today for those of you who haven't and may have a few extra coins jingling in your pocket. By all means, hit up our tip jar. You can find that on our webpage. You can also navigate to akoutlaw.live, and there you can join us in this presentation, and you can also make a small donation there. Every little bit helps us get to our next level. So please consider doing so. Today we're talking about the power of Thor, the strength of Thor. Now, in all the sagas, we read about Thor's evolution, particularly remembering that Thor really began his recognition. He was really originally recognized from back in the day when he was being recognized by the Germanic tribes before the Norse. So we have tribes in Germania that would recognize the hammer of Thor, and certainly the strength of Thor. Now, he would go on to migrate through a multitude of roles, but primarily back in the days when he was part of being recognized by the Germanic tribes, he really represented kind of a very rounded figure that not only possessed physical strength, the brutal strength that we read about, certainly in the Norse sagas, Snorri Sturluson and many others who have documented about him, but we also see a mental strength. When Thor set his mind to doing something, regardless what it was getting done. So we see a lot of times where he recognizes a challenge such as a conflict with the giants. He knows what's got to be done. He sets his mind to getting it done, and that's what he does. Now, this abilities, these skills that he possessed, would go on to be recognized in his Norse recognition as well. So when he kind of evolved up to further north, we really see this trait certainly being recognized within the sagas. Now, it may not have been called out as such and said, oh, look, this is what this was, but it was certainly there when we talk about conquering giants and always outnumbered, and you know, quite honestly, the giants were much bigger than Thor was, so he was really outgunned, and yet he was still completely able to establish his objective, whatever that was. Now, the thing that a lot of people say is we kind of put Thor up on a pedestal, and what I guess I should offer real upfront is, when we think about interacting with Norse gods and goddesses, many people think of this idea of worship, putting them up on this pedestal, putting them above us, and elevating their status and all this. This is really not the way that Norse gods, particularly the Norse gods and goddesses, but the Germanic ones as well, it's really not how they operated. They are our equals, or they considered themselves our equals. They were simply gifted by these additional traits that helped them to do this next thing. So they were really normal people in their eyes, right? So we see a lot when we're reading through the many stories and sagas, and certainly as I've connected with my ancestors, I've heard many stories about them really being flawed. They weren't perfect. They weren't this creature that couldn't be around bad or sin. That's really not what the Norse gods were. The Norse gods really celebrated. They drank too much. They fought. They fought in peace as well as in war. They were a rowdy bunch, if to put it lightly, and that was okay. Now, is rowdy societally acceptable here in wherever you are? No, probably not. All right, but you can wrestle. I mean, you know, as long as nobody gets hurt and both people offer their permission, very much like the boxing matches that people pay millions of dollars for. You can rumble around in the grass and just have fun, right? When we think about the strength, the power, the brutal strength that Thor had, his ability to clean out people's stores of mead, right? As an example, Thor was really able to set his mind to something, and this is something that you don't give yourself enough credit for. We all have this ability. The ability simply to set our mind to something and getting it done. Now, a lot of times, a lot of things going on in our lives, we're very distracted, we're very pulled in many directions. And of course, we have this guy who is probably one of the best distractions that we could have ever prayed against. I'm not sure how that goes. But anyway, the story is that we need focus. And a lot of times we say, oh, well, I've got the best intentions and this, I'm going forward, put my mind to it, and yet kind of falls apart, right? So this is the aged old joke, if you will, about New Year's resolutions. We said New Year's resolution, December 31st, we're going to start doing this, whatever this is. We're going to stop smoking. We're going to stop drinking. We're going to start walking. We're going to start eating salads, whatever it is, right? Usually by about January 5th, 7th. For those of us with a little bit more constitution, we may make it to the 14th. But then we start finding reasons why this doesn't work, right? As an example, we set a New Year's resolutions to go walking 3 times a week. But then, by the 15th already, usually, we're already finding scheduling conflicts. We're already starting to see where other things are kind of drawing our attention away from our mindset. And before you know it, that gym membership has gone pretty much to waste. This is the idea of strength of a decision. This is the mental strength. So, and while these are gross exaggerations or demonstrations of this, it comes down to every little decision we make, right? So when we think about influential energy as an example, people are trying to sell us. Now, we can get caught up in the impulse of it, right? They're hard selling. They're trying to get us to buy a product. We can immediately say, no, I don't want that. I don't need that product. I have zero value in it, right? But if we don't hold to that and we say, well, maybe I could use it to do this with, or maybe I could use this as like a re-gift, right? So I'm getting it, but then with every intentions that I'll find somebody to give it to, because I really don't use it. I never need it. And it winds up sitting around the house for ever, right? This is the strength of decisions. This is the strength, the mental strength that we're talking about here. Once we make a decision and we set our mind to a particular perspective or a particular path that we're going to travel, i.e., supposedly our New Year's resolutions, as an example. And we set our resolution and we say, this is what we're going to do. Many of us fairly quickly forget the priority in establishing that resolution. In the days of my ancestors, and particularly for some people now, we made what are called oaths. O-A-T-H, oath. The oath, many people took very, very, very seriously. And in the days of the Norse, if you were to violate this oath, as an example, you were considered an outlaw. I mean, they took it that serious. So it was very, very often that when, particularly when people made oaths under the Norse law, it was almost a binding agreement. So it was almost a legally binding agreement, and it was certainly an honor binding agreement. Now, there are many other cultures that are very much the same way. We read about, for those of you who have studied the indigenous tribes of the Americas, indigenous tribes everywhere are very honor bound, right? So when they make an oath, they're setting their mind to that thing. They're giving priority over everything else to that thing, right? Seeing it through to completion. But we also see other cultures, very much Japanese and some of the Chinese, particularly further and further north that we go, there in Asia, we find, quite honestly, a very honor-bound society that takes their oaths very seriously. Now, when we make a decision and we decide that we're going to do something for us, we're going to heal ourselves, we're going to grow ourselves, we're going to extend what we know and how we feel, we're essentially creating an oath with ourselves. We're saying, self, this is what we're going to do, and this is the way it will be. But then our mind has to put a priority on that oath. If we don't believe it, it'll never come to fruition, in very much the same way as we do with our New Year's resolutions. We simply say, yep, we're going to do that, with no intentions of really completing it, right? So we haven't really set our mind to accomplishing that objective. Now, for those of us who may struggle with setting our mind to something, a trick I've used is the affirmation process, and we've all heard or read about that. If you haven't, affirmations are simply small, usually textual representations, maybe a visual, to represent, to kind of keep us back on the path, to bring our focus back to the promise we made to ourselves. Now, in many cases, we read, particularly in the Norse sagas, where they're making oaths on a ring, right? So we have a ring of Odin, all right? I actually have two. And if I were to make an oath on that ring, I'm making an oath to Odin. But more importantly, just as importantly as swearing an oath to the god Odin, I also now have a visual reminder of that oath. So if I start kind of getting derailed, I simply look at the ring and brings me right back to where I want to be, right? So that's really what the value of totems in our lives is for. If I feel that I need strength in getting through my day-to-day operations, I whip out my Mjolnir and I hold it, and I'm communicating through Mjolnir to the god Thor. This allows me to then refocus, rebring all of my focus kind of back to what my oath was to Thor, right? So being strong in my decisions. So that's really what, when we're talking about a mental strength, when we're talking about exercising this mental strength, this is really what we're talking about. Is we're talking about making a decision and thinking of it as an oath to the self. Is we're promising that this is a priority now, right? We've made a priority in very much the same way that we would probably do, hopefully we do, with our significant others when we stand there and recite whatever oath that you will make to your significant other in the ceremony of spiritual bonding. We're really making an oath to that person. We're making an oath to make them a priority, to push them to the forefront of everything that we think about. Thinking about them and their future and their growth and whatever it's an oath. Now, the same thing should apply to our children. Although we don't make an oath, I do, when my children were born, and even my youngest ones, particularly my younger ones, there was an oath made to, in my older children, it was to God, and to my younger children, it was, of course, to Frigg. And I swore that I would do anything to make sure that they were safe and taken care of, that they would be healthy, and they would grow, and they would do the right things, and they would be good people. And so these oaths then allowed me to set those individuals, my children, as priorities. Now, I've also now taken upon myself to engage in an oath with Frigg to help me guide my grandchildren as well. Same thing applies. I've made an oath. So these folks, my grandchildren, have a priority in my life. How do I remember it? Now, in the case of my grandchildren and my children, I have ink on my body that denotes, hey, they are a priority. So when I'm, looking at myself in the morning, doing the right, get ready for work and brushing hair and getting the knots out of my braids, I'm standing in front of a mirror, and I'm able to see this ink and be reminded of the oath. So that's really what an affirmation is. That's what an affirmation does for us, right? So it's super, super important that we remember these oaths that we're making to ourselves. This is the strength that Thor brings to us in the stories that are told about him. This is why Thursday, or Thor's Day, is so important for us, because it's to remind us. We've gone through most of the week now, right? We've gone through the most of the work week. We're getting ready, kind of mentally getting ready for that weekend. But today's the day we need to remember the oaths we made to ourselves, because those need to have a priority. And if we're starting to stray, now is a great time to kind of re-steer the ship, get it back on course, so that we can complete whatever it is that we've made this oath for. So super important that we remember our oaths. In the days of my ancestors, oaths were a very serious thing. If you were to violate an oath, you became an outlaw and you were hunted. And if you were caught, as an example, you would have entered into a life of slavery until the oath was completed, or there was an arbitration that allowed the oath to be resolved. But you were in slavery. You were a slave to that which whom you had entered into this oath. So oaths were taken very, very seriously. As I've read more and more about my family, my ancestry, my history, many of my ancestors were Ulfhethnar. Now, Ulfhethnar, for those of you not cognizant of Norse legends and lore, the Ulfhethnar were essentially warriors bound to the spirit of a wolf. So we had special powers. They had very much the same powers as the berserkers. However, the berserkers kind of represented brute power, brute strength. They were the bears of battle. So the biting of the shields, the can't be hurt by iron or fire. So we really see them as being these kind of crazed warriors on the battlefield, but they were brute force warriors. That's what they were designed to be. That's what they were called to be. They were very powerful. They were very, but they were solitary. Whereas Ulfhethnar The wolf, bound to the spirit of the wolf, had very much the same shape-shifting abilities and protection in battles that we see in the Berserker legend. But because of their bonding to the wolf, we are more cunning. They used pack mentality. They were very much orientated to the family, yet they could still fight. Very much, we read of his story where King Harold united what is today Norway with these berserkers and the Ulfhethnar. So this is very much a very real thing, and I can tell you personally, with an ancestry dating back over 53 generations of Ulfhethnar, I can tell you that it means a lot. My oath now, as I've come to know myself as the Ulfhethnar, is to Othin and to my ancestors, to all of my grandfathers who have come before me, and to carry on that line in the same way. Now, one of the other things that the Ulfhethnar bring, which is where I kind of step into my role in the legends, is that they were really associated with magical beings. So the Ulfhethnar were really connected to the Landveti. Now, Landveti is an Old Norse word which simply means spirits of the land. That's what it means. These spirits would rise up in battle with the Ulfhethnar to help beat the enemy, right? To conquer the enemy. And so you find the actual lands that we're having this battle on, the actual lands would rise up. So you would get bogs out of the middle of nowhere. You might have landslides that would block roads and help the Ulfhethnar to obtain the better position, whatever it took, right? So we really see the Landveti kind of assisting the Ulfhethnar. Now, this relationship that the Ulfhethnar would have with the Landveti would not just be in battle. It would be in when they weren't in battle as well. And so they served, you will find throughout history, and certainly in my family's history, where we became advisors to the chieftains and the kings as to kind of the magical going forwards, and certainly the division of land, as to understanding how the lands affected life and how success could be based on this. So there was really this spiritual energy connection that the Ulfhethnar enjoyed above and beyond their role in combat. So a lot of stories about the Ulfhethnar, and certainly for those of you who follow my show, the plural, lots of stories about the Ulfhethnar. So I'm very proud to be one of the Ulfhethnar. Generationally, I was given this gift. In 2020, I received a vision from Othin where my birthright was absorbed, was actually taken, and I, like many before me, have sworn now an oath to Othin that I would do as he needed me to do. And this, speaking with you and helping you to find that better mental space, is part of that, helping you to understand the beauty within you, that awesome gift that you are to our existence. So today we're talking about Thor, and we're talking about mental strength. We're talking about making an oath to the self. We're talking about putting that as a priority in our lives. So as you go about celebrating today, Thor's Day, I want you to think about making oaths to yourself, actually bonding with that and setting that as a priority. Now, we don't make oaths for just anything. You make oaths for the important things in your lives, and it makes it much more easier, if you will, to then uphold that oath, to set that as your priority and go forward. So I hope that you will use today, Thursday, to celebrate your strength. Remember, these are bonds and oaths that you're making with yourself. Set them as your priority and make sure that no one can influence you away from the priorities that you have of restoring and healing and being the best version of you. All right? I hope that you will take my advice, but again, as it is, I offer this wisdom and knowledge and teachings that I've been given in hopes that you will take it. But if you decide that, nah, I'm denying that energy, by all means, that is completely up to you. Whatever helps you to find, obtain, or maintain that mental space. All right? So, let us celebrate Thor and, of course, Mjolnir. And remember always that you are indeed a gift to all of existence. Without you, we don't have your perspective. And we need that to complete who we are and what we hope to accomplish. All right? So you are an important part of my life and certainly anyone else's life, as offering truly a different perspective on those events in life. All right, my friends, I wish you the very best Thursday. I look forward to seeing you again tomorrow when we will celebrate the Norse goddess, Freya, my favorite of all the goddesses, Freya. I love Freya. So I hope that you will join me as we speak about what gifts Freya brought to Midgard and certainly to all of existence. Have a wonderful Thursday. We will see you tomorrow.
I'm watching for Felina's Belly Snake, a special production of Whispers of the Norse. Brought to you by the Alaska Wolf Hefnar in South Central Alaska. Guidance and wisdom, courtesy of an ancient Celtic Norse shaman. Thank you so much for joining us today.